Chapter 38. I sing to myself, though Apollo is cooler, like way, way cooler. I hated being right. When we got to the end of the tunnel, the word death blazed on the floor behind us. We found ourselves in a larger circular chamber, 5 new tunnels branching out before us like the fingers and thumb of a giant automaton hand. I waited for a new clue to appear on the wall. Whatever it was, I desperately wanted to answer, to be not really, or perhaps, and defeats it easily. Why is nothing happening? Grover asked. Meg tilted her head. Listen. Blood roared in my ears, but at last I heard what Meg was talking about. A distant cry of pain, deep and guttural, more beast than human, along with the dull crackle of fire, as if, oh gods, as if someone or something had been grazed by Titan heat and now lay dying a slow death. Sounds like a monster, Grover decided. Should we help it? How? Meg asked. She had a point. The noise echoed, so diffuse I couldn't tell which corridor it came from, even if we were free to pick our path without answering riddles. We'll have to keep going, I decided. I imagine Medea has monsters on guard down here. That must be one of them. I doubt she's too concerned about them occasionally getting caught in the fires. Grover winced. Doesn't seem right, letting it suffer. Also, Meg added, what if one of those monsters triggers a flash fire and it comes our way? I stared at my young master. You are a fountain of dark questions today. We have to have faith. In the Sibyl, she asked. In those evil shoes. I didn't have an answer for her. Fortunately, I was saved by the belated appearance of the next clue. 3 golden lines in Latin. Oh, Latin, Grover said. Hold on. I can do this. He squinted at the words and then sighed. No, I can't. Honestly, no Greek or Latin, I said. What do they teach you in Satyr School? Mostly, important stuff like plants. Thank you, Meg muttered. I translated the clue for my less educated friends. Now must I tell of the flight of the king. The last to reign over the Roman people was a man unjust yet puissant in arms. I nodded. I believe that's a quote from Ovid. Neither of my comrades looked impressed. So what's the answer? Meg asked. The last Roman emperor? No, not an emperor, I said. In the very first days of Rome, the city was ruled by kings. The last one, the 7th, was overthrown and Rome became a republic. I tried to cast my thoughts back to the kingdom of Rome. The whole time period was a little hazy to me. We gods were still based in Greece then. Rome was something of a backwater. The last king, though, he brought back some bad memories. Meg broke my reverie. What is puissant? It means powerful, I said. Doesn't sound like that. If somebody called me puissant, I would hit them. But you are in fact puissant in arms. She hit me. Ow! Guys, Grover said, what's the name of the last Roman king? I thought. I just had it, now it's gone. Something. Taco? Grover said helpfully. Why would a Roman king be named Taco? I don't know. Grover rubbed his stomach. Because I'm hungry? Curse the satyr, now all I could think of was tacos. Then the answer came back to me. Tarquin, or Tarquinius, in the original Latin. Well, which is it? Meg asked. I studied the corridors. The tunnel on the far left, the thumb, had 10 spaces, enough for Tarquinius. The tunnel on the middle had 7, enough for Tarquin. It's that one, I decided, pointing to the centre tunnel. How can you be sure? Grover asked. Because the arrow told us the answers would be in English. That, I conceded, and also because the tunnels look like 5 fingers. It makes sense. The maze would give me the middle finger. I raised my voice. Isn't that right? The answer is Tarquin, the middle finger. I love you too, maze. We walked the path. The name Tarquin blazed in gold behind us. The corridor opened into a square chamber, the largest space we'd seen yet. The walls and floor were tiled in faded Roman mosaics that looked original, though I was fairly sure the Romans had never colonized any part of the Los Angeles metropolitan area. The air felt even warmer and drier. The floor was hot enough that I could feel it through the soles of my sandals. One positive thing about the room, it offered us only 3 new tunnels to choose from, rather than 5. Grover sniffed the air. I don't like this room. I smell something monstery. Meg gripped her scimitars. From what direction? All of them? Oh, look, I said, trying to sound cheerful. Another clue. We approached the nearest mosaic wall where 2 golden lines of English glowed across the tiles. Leaves, body leaves, growing up above me, above death. Perennial roots, tall leaves. Oh, the winter shone up threes you, delicate leaves. Perhaps my brain was still stuck in Latin and Greek because those lines meant nothing to me, even in plain English. I like this one, Meg said. It's about leaves. Yes, lots of leaves, I agreed. But it's nonsense. Grover choked. Nonsense? Don't you recognise it? Should I? You're the god of poetry. I felt my face begin to burn. I used to be the god of poetry, which does not mean I am a walking encyclopedia of every obscure line ever written. Obscure? Grover's shrill voice echoed unnervingly down the corridors. That's Walt Whitman, from Leaves of Grass. I don't remember exactly which poem it's from, but... You read poetry? Meg asked. Grover licked his lips. You know, mostly nature poetry. Whitman, for a human, had some beautiful things to say about trees. And leaves, Meg noted. And roots. Exactly. I wanted to lecture them about how overrated Walt Whitman was. The man was always singing songs to himself instead of praising others, like me, for instance. But I decided the critique would have to wait. Do you know the answer, then? I asked Grover. Is this a fill-in-the-blanks question? Multiple choice, true or false? Grover studied the lines. I think, there's a word missing at the beginning. It's supposed to read tomb leaves, body leaves, etc. Tomb leaves? Meg asked. That doesn't make sense. But neither does body leaves, unless he's talking about a dryad. It's imagery, I said. Clearly, he is describing a place of death, overgrown by nature. Oh, now you're an expert on Walt Whitman, Grover said. Sutter, don't test me. When I become a god again... Both of you, stop, Meg ordered. Apollo, say the answer. Fine, I sighed. Maze, the answer is tomb. We took another successful trip down the middle finger. I mean Central Hall. The word tomb blazed in the 4 squares behind us. At the end, we arrived in a circular room, even larger and more ornate. Across the domed ceiling spread a silver-on-blue mosaic of zodiac signs. 6 new tunnels radiated outward. In the middle of the floor stood an old fountain, unfortunately dry. A drink would have been much appreciated. Interpreting poetry and solving puzzles is thirsty work. The rooms are getting bigger, Grover noted, and more elaborate. Maybe that's good, I said. It might mean we're getting closer. Meg eyed the zodiac images. You sure we didn't take a wrong turn? The prophecy doesn't even make sense so far. Apollo faces death, Tarquin tomb. You have to assume the small words, I said. I believe the message is Apollo faces death in Tarquin's tomb. I gulped. Actually, I don't like that message. Perhaps the little words we're missing are Apollo faces no death, Tarquin's tomb. Something. Maybe the next words are grants him fabulous prizes. Uh-huh. Meg pointed at the rim of the central fountain, where the next clue had appeared. 3 lines in English read, Named for Apollo's fallen love, this flower should be planted in autumn. So, set the bulb in the soil with the pointy end up. Cover with soil, and water thoroughly. You are transplanting. I stifled a sob. First the maze forced me to read Walt Whitman. Now it taunted me with my own past. To mention my dead love, Hyacinthus, and his tragic death, to reduce him to a bit of oracle trivia. No, this was too much. I sat down on the rim of the fountain and cupped my face in my hands. What's wrong? Grover asked nervously. Meg answered. Those lines are talking about his old boyfriend's Hyacinthus, I corrected. I surged to my feet, my sadness converting to anger. My friends edged away. I supposed I must have looked like a crazy man, and that's indeed how I felt. Herophile! I yelled into the darkness. I thought we were friends. Apollo, Meg said. I don't think she's taunting you on purpose. Also, the answer is about the flower, hyacinth. I'm pretty sure those lines are from the Farmer's Almanac. I don't care if they're from the telephone directory, I bellowed. Enough is enough. Hyacinth! I yelled into the corridors. The answer is hyacinth. Are you happy? Meg yelled, No! In retrospect, she really should have yelled Apollo stop. Then I would have had no choice but to obey her command. Therefore, what happened next is Meg's fault. I marched down the only corridor with 8 squares. Grover and Meg ran after me, but by the time they caught me, it was too late. I looked behind, expecting to see the word hyacinth spelled out on the floor. Instead, only 6 of the squares were lit up in glaring correction pen red. Unless. Under our feet, the tunnel floor disappeared and we dropped into a pit of fire. Chapter 39. Noble sacrifice. I'll protect you from the flames. Wow, I'm a good guy. Under different circumstances, how delighted I would have been to see that unless. Apollo faces death in Tarquin's tomb unless. Oh, happy conjunction. It meant there was a way to avoid potential death, and I was all about avoiding potential death. Unfortunately, falling into a pit of fire dampened my newfound hope. In mid-air, before I could even process what was happening, I lurched to a halt, my quiver strap yanked tight across my chest, my left foot nearly popping free from my ankle. I found myself dangling next to the wall of the pit, about 20 feet below. The shaft opened into a lake of fire. Meg was clinging desperately to my foot. Above me, Grover held me by the quiver with one hand, his other gripping a tiny ledge of rock. He kicked off his shoes and tried to find purchase with his hooves on the wall. "Well done, brave satyr," I cried. "Pull us up." Grover's eyes bugged. His face dripped with sweat. He made a whimpering sound that seemed to indicate he didn't have the strength to pull all three of us out of the pit. If I survived and became a god again, I would have to talk to the Council of Cloven Elders about adding more physical education classes to Satyr School. I clawed at the wall, hoping to find a convenient rail or emergency exit. There was nothing. Below me, Meg yelled, "Really, Apollo? You water hyacinths thoroughly unless you are transplanting them." "How was I supposed to know that?" I protested. "You created hyacinths." Mortal logic. Just because a god creates something doesn't mean he understands it. Otherwise, Prometheus would know everything about humans, and I assure you he does not. I created hyacinths, so I suppose I'm supposed to know how to plant and water them? "Help!" Grover squeaked. His hooves shifted on the tiny crevices. His fingers trembled, his arms shaking as if he were holding the weight of 2 extra people, which, actually he was. The heat from below made it difficult to think. If you've ever stood near a barbecue fire or had your face too close to an open oven, you can imagine that feeling increased 100-fold. My eyes dried up, my mouth became parched, a few more breaths of scalding air, and I would probably lose consciousness. The fires below seemed to be sweeping across the stone floor. The drop itself would not be fatal. If only there were a way to turn off the fires. An idea came to me, a very bad idea, which I blamed on my boiling brain. Those flames were fueled by the essence of Helios. If some small bit of his consciousness remained, it was theoretically possible that I could communicate with him. Perhaps if I touched the fires directly, I could convince him that we were not the enemy and he should let us live. I would probably have a luxurious 3 nanoseconds to accomplish this before dying in agony. Besides, if I fell, my friends might stand a chance of climbing out. After all, I was the heaviest person in our party, thanks to Zeus's cruel curse of Flab. Terrible, terrible idea. I would never have had the courage to try it if I had not thought of Jason Grace and what he had done to save me. "Meg," I said, "can you attach yourself to the wall?" "Do I look like Spider-Man?" she yelled back. Very few people look as good in tights as Spider-Man. Meg was certainly not one of them. "Use your swords," I called. Holding my ankle with just one hand, she summoned a scimitar. She stabbed at the wall, once, twice. The curve of the blade did not make her job easy. On the 3rd stroke, however, the point sank deep into the rock. She gripped the hilt and let go of my ankle, holding herself above the flames with only her sword. "What now?" "Stay put." "I can do that." "Grover," I yelled up, "you can drop me now. But don't worry, I have a—" Grover dropped me. Honestly, what sort of protector just drops you into a fire when you tell him it's okay to drop you into a fire? I expected a long argument, during which I would assure him that if I had a plan to save myself, I would. I expected protests from Grover and Meg. Well, maybe not from Meg. And how I shouldn't sacrifice myself for their sake. How I couldn't possibly survive the flames and so on. But nope, he dumped me without a thought. At least it gave me no time for second guessing. I couldn't torture myself with doubts like, what if this doesn't work? What if I cannot survive the solar fires that used to be second nature to me? What if this lovely prophecy we are piecing together about me dying in the tomb of Tarquin does not automatically mean that I will not die today in this horrible burning maze? I don't remember hitting the floor. My soul seemed to detach from my body. I found myself thousands of years back in time. On the very first morning I became the god of the sun. Overnight, Helios had vanished. I didn't know what final prayer to me as the god of the sun had finally tipped the balance, banishing the old titan to oblivion while promoting me to his spot. But here I was at the Palace of the Sun. Terrified and nervous, I pushed open the doors of the throne room. The air burned. The light blinded me. Helios's oversized golden throne stood empty, his cloak draped over the armrest. His helm, whip and gilded shoes sat on the dais, ready for their master. But the titan himself was simply gone. I am a god, I told myself. I can do this. I strode toward the throne, willing myself not to combust. If I ran out of the palace screaming with my toga on fire, the very first day on the job, I would never hear the end of it. Slowly, the fires receded before me. By force of will, I grew in size until I could comfortably wear the helm and cloak of my predecessor. I didn't try out the throne, though I had a job to do, a very little time. I glanced at the whip. Some trainers say you should never show kindness with a new team of horses. They will see you as weak. But I decided to leave the whip. I would not start my new position as a harsh taskmaster. I strode into the stable. The sun chariot's beauty brought tears to my eyes. The 4 sun horses stood already harnessed, their hooves polished gold, their manes rippling fire, their eyes molten ingots. They regarded me warily. "Who are you?" "I am Apollo," I said, forcing myself to sound confident. "We're going to have a great day." I leapt into the chariot and off we went. I'll admit it was a steep learning curve, about a 45-degree arc to be precise. I may have done a few inadvertent loops in the sky. I may have caused a few new glaciers and deserts until I found the proper cruising altitude. But by the end of the day, the chariot was mine. The horses had shaped themselves to my will, my personality. I was Apollo, god of the sun. I tried to hold on to that feeling of confidence, the elation of that successful first day. I came back to my senses and found myself at the bottom of the pit, crouching in the flames. "Helios," I said, "it's me." The blaze swirled around me, trying to incinerate my flesh and dissolve my soul. I could feel the presence of the Titan, bitter, hazy, angry. His whip seemed to be lashing me 1,000 times a second. "I will not be burned," I said. "I am Apollo. I am your rightful heir." The fires raged hotter. Helios resented me. But wait, that wasn't the full story. He hated being here. He hated this maze, the half-life prison. "I will free you," I promised. Noise crackled and hissed in my ears. Perhaps it was only the sound of my head catching fire, but I thought I heard a voice in the flames. "Kill her." Her. Medea. Helios's emotions burned their way into my mind. I felt his loathing for his sorceress granddaughter. All that Medea had told me earlier about holding back Helios's wrath. That might have been true. But above all, she was holding Helios back from killing her. She had chained him, bound him, his will to hers, wrapped herself in powerful protections against his godly fire. Helios did not like me, no, but he hated Medea's presumptuous magic. To be released from his torment, he needed his granddaughter dead. I wondered, not for the first time, why we Greek deities had never created a god of family therapy. We certainly could have used one. Or perhaps we had one before I was born and she quit. Or Kronos swallowed her whole. Whatever the case, I told the flames, "I will do this. I will free you, but you must let us pass." Instantly, the fires raced away as if a tear had opened in the universe. I gasped. My skin steamed. My Arctic camouflage was now a lightly toasted grey. But I was alive. The room around me cooled rapidly. The flames, I realised, had retreated down a single tunnel that led from the chamber. "Meg! Grover!" I called. "You can come down." Meg dropped on top of me, squashing me flat. "Ow!" I screamed. "Not like that." Grover was more courteous. He climbed down the wall and dropped to the floor with goat-worthy dexterity. He smelled like a burnt wool blanket. His face was badly sunburned. His cap had fallen into the fire, revealing the tips of his horns, which steamed like miniature volcanoes. Meg had somehow come through just fine. She'd even managed to retract her sword from the wall before falling. She pulled her flask from her supply belt, drank most of the water and handed the rest to Grover. "Thanks," I grumbled. "You beat the heat," she noted. "Good job. Finally had a godly burst of power?" I think it was more about Helios deciding to give us a pass. He wants out of this maze as much as we want him out. He wants us to kill Medea." Grover gulped. "So she's down here. She didn't die on that yacht." "Figures." Meg squinted down the steaming corridor. "Did Helios promise not to burn us if you mess up any more answers?" That wasn't my fault." "Yeah," Meg said. "Kinda was," Grover agreed. "Honestly, I fall into a blazing pit, negotiate a truce with a Titan, and flush a firestorm out of the room to save my friends, and they still want to talk about how I can't recall instructions from the farmer's almanac." "I don't think we can count on Helios never to burn us," I said, "any more than we can expect Heraphile not to use word puzzles. It's just their nature. This was a one-time get-out-of-the-flames-free card." Grover smothered the tips of his horns. "Well then, let's not waste it." "Right." I hitched up my slightly toasted camouflage pants and tried to recapture that confident tone I'd had the first time I addressed my sun horses. "Follow me. I'm sure it'll be fine." Chapter 40. Congratulations. You finished the word puzzle. You win. Enemies. Fine, in this case, meant fine if you enjoy lava, chains and evil magic. The corridor led straight to the chamber of the oracle, which on the one hand, hooray, on the other hand, not so wonderful. The room was a rectangle the size of a basketball court. Lining the walls were half a dozen entrances, each a simple stone doorway with a small landing that overhung the pool of lava I'd seen in my visions. Now, though, I realised the bubbling and shimmering substance was not lava. It was the divine ichor of Helios, hotter than lava, more powerful than rocket fuel, impossible to get out of if you spilled it on your clothes. I could tell you from personal experience. We had reached the very centre of the maze, the holding tank for Helios's power. Floating on the surface of the ichor were large stone tiles, each about 5 feet square, making columns and rows that had no logical patterns. "It's a crossword," Grover said. Of course he was right. Unfortunately, none of the stone bridges connected with our little balcony, nor did any of them lead to the opposite side of the room, where the Sibyl of Eritrea sat forlornly on her stone platform. Her home wasn't any better than a solitary confinement cell. She'd been provided with a bed, a table, and a toilet. And yes, even immortal Sibyls need to use the toilet. Some of their best prophecies come on them. Never mind. My heart ached to see Herophile in such conditions. She looked exactly as I remembered her, a young woman with braided auburn hair and pale skin, her solid athletic build a tribute to her hardy naiad mother and her stout shepherd father. The Sibyl's white robes were stained with smoke and spotted with cinder burns. She was intently watching an entrance on the wall to her left, so she didn't seem to notice us. "That's her," Meg whispered. "Unless you see another oracle," I said. "Well, then talk to her." I wasn't sure why I had to do all the work, but I cleared my throat and yelled across the boiling lake of ichor, "Herophile!" The Sibyl jumped to her feet. Only then did I notice the chains, molten links, just as I'd seen in my visions, shackled to her wrists and ankles, anchoring her to the platform and allowing her just enough room to move from one side to the other. Oh, the indignity! Apollo! I'd been hoping her face might light up with joy when she saw me. Instead, she looked mostly shocked. "I thought you would come through the other..." Her voice seized up. She grimaced with concentration, then blurted out, "7 letters, ends in Y." "Doorway?" Grover guessed. Across the surface of the lake, stone tiles ground and shifted formation. One block wedged itself against our little platform, half a dozen more stacked up beyond it, making a 7-tile bridge extending into the room. Glowing, golden letters appeared along the tiles, starting with a Y at our feet. Doorway. Herophile clapped excitedly, jangling her molten chains. "Well done! Hurry!" I was not anxious to test my weight on a stone raft floating over a burning lake of ichor, but Meg strode right out, so Grover and I followed. "No offence, Miss Lady," Meg called to the Sibyl, "but we already almost fell into one lava fire thingy. Could you just make a bridge from here to there with more puzzles?" "I wish I could," said Herophile. "This is my curse. It's either talk like this or stay completely." She gagged. 9 letters. 5th letter is D." "Quiet," Grover yelled. Our raft rumbled and rocked. Grover windmilled his arms and might have fallen off had Meg not caught him. Thank goodness for short people. They have low centres of gravity. "Not quiet," I yelped. "That is not our final answer. That would be idiotic, since quiet is only 5 letters and doesn't have a D." I glared at the satyr. "Sorry," he muttered. "I got excited." Meg studied the tiles. In the frames of her glasses, her rhinestones glinted red. "Quietude," she suggested. "That's 9 letters." "First of all," I said, "I'm impressed you know that word. Second context, stay completely quietude doesn't make sense. Also, the D would be in the wrong place." "Then, what's the answer, smarty god?" she demanded, "and don't get it wrong this time." Such unfairness. I tried to come up with synonyms for quiet. I couldn't think of many. I liked music and poetry. Silence really wasn't my thing. "Soundless," I said at last. "That's got to be it." The tiles rewarded us by forming a second bridge, 9 across, soundless, connecting to the first bridge by the D. Unfortunately, since the new bridge led sideways, it got us no closer to the Oracle's platform. "Herophile," I called, "I appreciate your predicament, but is there any way you can manipulate the length of the answers? Perhaps the next one can be a really long, really easy word that leads to your platform." "You know I cannot, Apollo." She clasped her hands. "But please, you must hurry if you wish to stop Caligula from becoming a..." She gagged. 3 letters, middle letter is O." "God," I said unhappily. A third bridge formed, 3 tiles connecting to the O in soundless, which brought us only 1 tile closer to our goal. Meg, Grover and I crowded together on the G tile. The room felt even hotter, as if Helios's ichor was working itself into a fury the closer we got to Herophile. Grover and Meg sweated profusely. My own Arctic camouflage was sopping wet. I had not been so uncomfortable in a group hug since the Rolling Stones' first 1969 show at Madison Square Garden. Tip: as tempting as it might be, don't throw your arms around Mick Jagger and Keith Richards during their encore set. Those men can sweat. Herophile sighed. "I'm sorry, my friends. I'll try again. Some days I wish prophecy was a present I had never..." She winced in pain. 6 letters. Last letter is a D. Grover shuffled around. "Wait, what? The D is back there?" The heat made my eyes feel like shish kebab onions, but I tried to survey the rows and columns so far. "Perhaps," I said, "this new clue is another vertical word, branching off the D in soundless." Herophile's eyes gleamed with encouragement. Meg wiped her sweaty forehead. "Well, then why did we bother with God? It doesn't lead anywhere." "Oh no," Grover moaned. We're still forming the prophecy, aren't we? Doorway, soundless, God. What does that mean? I don't know, I admitted, my brain cells simmering in my skull like chicken soup noodles. Let's get some more words. Heraphile said she wishes prophecy was a present she'd never... What? Gotten doesn't work, Meg muttered. Received? Grover offered. No, too many letters. Perhaps a metaphor, I suggested, a present she'd never opened. Grover gulped. Is that our final answer? He and Meg both looked down at the burning ichor, then back at me. Their faith in my abilities was not heartwarming. Yes, I decided. Heraphile, the answer is opened. The Sibyl sighed with relief as a new bridge extended from the D in Soundless, leading us across the lake. Crowded together on the O tile, we were now only about 5 feet from the Sibyl's platform. Should we jump? Meg asked. Heraphile shrieked, then clamped her hands over her mouth. I'm guessing a jump would be unwise, I said. We have to complete the puzzle. Heraphile, perhaps one more very small word going forward? The Sibyl curled her fingers, then said slowly and carefully, small word, across, starts with Y. Small word down, near, or next to. A double play. I looked at my friends. I believe we are looking for yo, across, and by down. That should allow us to reach the platform. Grover peered over the side of the tile where the lake of ichor was now bubbling white hot. I'd hate to fail now. Is yo an acceptable word? I don't have the Scrabble rule book in front of me, I admitted, but I think so. I was glad this wasn't Scrabble. Athena won every time with her insufferable vocabulary. One time she played abaxial on a triple and Zeus lightning bolted the top of Mount Parnassus in his rage. That's our answer, Sybil, I said. Yo, and bye. Another 2 tiles clicked into place, connecting our bridge to Heraphile's platform. We ran across and Heraphile clapped and wept for joy. She held out her arms to hug me, then seemed to remember she was shackled with blazing hot chains. Meg looked back at the path of answers in our wake. Okay, if that's the end of the prophecy, what does it mean? Doorway, soundless, God opened, yo, bye. Heraphile started to say something and then thought better of it. She looked at me hopefully. Let's assume some small words again, I ventured. If we combine the first part of the maze, we have Apollo faces death in Tarquin's tomb, unless... the doorway to... I glanced at Heraphile, who nodded encouragement. The doorway to the soundless God. I don't know who that is. Unless the doorway to the soundless God is opened by... You forgot the yo, Grover said. I think we can bypass the yo since it was a double play. Grover tugged his singed goatee. This is why I don't play Scrabble. Also, I tend to eat the tiles. I consulted Heraphile. So, Apollo, me, I face death in the tomb of Tarquin, unless the doorway to the soundless God is opened by... What? Meg's right, there's got to be more to the prophecy. Somewhere off to my left, a familiar voice called, Not necessarily. On the ledge in the middle of the left-hand wall stood the sorceress Medea, looking very much alive and delighted to see us. Behind her, 2 Pandos guards held a chained and beaten prisoner, our friend Crest. Hello, my dears, Medea smiled. You see, there doesn't have to be an end to the prophecy, because you're all going to die now anyway. Chapter 41. Meg sings. It's over. Everybody just go home. We are so roasted. Meg struck first. With quick, sure moves, she severed the chains that bound the Sibyl, then glared at Medea as if to say, Ha-ha! I have unleashed my attack oracle. The shackles fell from Heraphile's wrists and ankles, revealing ugly red burn rings. Heraphile stumbled back, clutching her hands to her chest. She looked more horror-struck than grateful. Meg McCaffrey, no, you shouldn't have. Whatever clue she was going to give, across or down, it didn't matter. The chains and shackles snapped back together, fully mended. Then they leapt like striking rattlesnakes at me, not Heraphile. They lashed themselves around my wrists and ankles. The pain was so intense it felt cool and pleasant at first, and then I screamed. Meg hacked at the molten links once again, but now they repelled her blades. With each blow the chains tightened, pulling me down until I was forced to crouch. With all my insignificant strength I struggled against the bonds, but I quickly learned this was a bad idea. Tugging against the manacles was like pressing my wrists against red-hot griddles. The agony almost made me pass out, and the smell, oh gods, I did not enjoy the smell of deep-fried Leicester. Only by staying perfectly neutral, allowing the manacles to take me where they wished, could I keep the pain at a level that was merely excruciating. Medea laughed, clearly enjoying my contortions. Well done, Meg McCaffrey. I was going to chain up Apollo myself, but you saved me a spell. I fell to my knees. Meg, Grover, get the Sibyl out of here. Leave me. Another brave, self-sacrificing gesture. I hope you're keeping count. Alas, my suggestion was futile. Medea snapped her fingers. The stone tile shifted across the surface of the ichor, leaving the Sibyl's platform cut off from any exit. Behind the sorceress, her 2 guards shoved Crest to the floor. He slid down, his back to the wall, his hands shackled but still stubbornly holding my combat ukulele. The Pandos's left eye was swollen shut, his lips were split. 2 fingers in his right hand were bent at a funny angle. He met my eyes, his expression full of shame. I wanted to reassure him that he had not failed. We should never have left him alone on guard duty. He would still be able to do amazing finger-picking, even with 2 broken fingers. But I could barely think straight, much less console my young music student. The 2 guards spread their giant ears. They sailed across the room, letting hot updrafts carry them to separate tiles near the corners of our platform. They drew their kanda blades and waited, just in case we were foolish enough to try leaping across. "You killed Timber," one hissed. "You killed Peak," said the other. On her landing, Medea chuckled. "You see, Apollo, I picked a couple of highly motivated volunteers. The rest were clamouring to accompany me down here, but—" "There's more outside?" Meg asked. I couldn't tell if she found this idea helpful. Hooray, fewer to kill now, or depressing. Boo, more to kill later. "Absolutely, my dear," Medea said. "Even if you had some foolish idea about getting past us, it wouldn't matter. Not that Flutter and Decibel will let that happen. Eh, boys?" "I'm Flutter," said Flutter. "I'm Decibel," said Decibel. "Maybe kill them now?" "Not just yet," Medea said. "Apollo is right, where I need him, ready to be dissolved. As for the rest of you, just relax. If you try to interfere, I will have Flutter and Decibel kill you. Then your blood might spill into the ichor, which would mess up the purity of the mixture." She spread her hands. "You understand, we can't have tainted ichor. I only need Apollo's essence for this recipe." I did not like the way she talked about me as if I were already dead, just one more ingredient, no more important than Toad's Eye or Sassafras. "I will not be dissolved," I growled. "Oh, Lester," she said, "you kind of will." The chains tightened further, forcing me onto all fours. I couldn't understand how Heraphile had endured this pain for so long. Then again, she was still immortal. I was not. "Let it begin," Medea cried. She began to chant. The ichor glowed a pure white, bleaching the colour from the room. Miniature stone tiles with sharp edges seemed to shift under my skin, flaying away my mortal form, rearranging me into a new kind of puzzle in which none of the answers was Apollo. I screamed, I spluttered. I might have begged for my life. Fortunately, for what little dignity I had left, I couldn't form the words. Out of the corner of my eye, in the hazy depths of my agony, I was dimly aware of my friends backing away, terrified by the steam and fire now erupting from cracks in my body. I didn't blame them. What could they do? At the moment, I was more likely to explode than Macro's Family Fun grenade packs, and my rapping was not nearly as tamper-resistant. "Meg," Grover said, fumbling with his panpipes, "I'm going to do a nature song. See if I can disrupt that chanting. Maybe summon help." Meg gripped her blades. "In this heat, underground. Nature's all we've got," he said. "Cover me." He began to play. Meg stood guard, her swords raised. Even Heraphile helped, balling her fists ready to show the Pandai how Sibyls dealt with ruffians back in Eritrea. The Pandai didn't seem to know how to react. They winced at the noise of the pipes, curling their ears around their heads like turbans. But they didn't attack. Medea had told them not to. And, as shaky as Grover's music was, they seemed unsure as to whether or not it constituted an act of aggression. Meanwhile, I was busy trying not to be flayed into nothingness, every bit of my willpower bent instinctively to keeping myself in one piece. I was Apollo, wasn't I? I was beautiful and people loved me. The world needed me. Medea's chant undermined my resolve. Her ancient Colchian lyrics wormed their way into my mind. Who needed old gods? Who cared about Apollo? Caligula was much more interesting. He was better suited to this modern world. He fitted. I did not. Why didn't I just let go? Then I could be at peace. Pain is an interesting thing. You think you've reached your limit and you can't possibly feel more tortured. Then you discover there is still another level of agony, and another level after that. The stone tiles under my skin cut and shifted and ripped. Fires burst like sun flares across my pathetic mortal body, blasting straight through Macro's cheap discount Arctic camouflage. I lost track of who I was, why I was fighting to stay alive. I wanted so badly to give up, just so the pain would stop. Then Grover found his groove. His notes became more confident and lively, his cadence steadier. He played a fierce, desperate jig, the sort that satyrs piped in springtime in the meadows of ancient Greece, hoping to encourage dryads to come forth and dance with them in the wild flowers. The song was hopelessly out of place in this fiery crossword dungeon. No nature spirit would possibly hear it. No dryads would come to dance with us. Nevertheless, the music dulled my pain. It lessened the intensity of the heat, like a cold towel pressed against my feverish forehead. Medea's chant faltered. She scowled at Grover. "Really? Are you going to stop that, or must I make you?" Grover played even more frenetically, a distress call to nature that echoed through the room, making the corridors reverberate like the pipes of a church organ. Meg abruptly joined in, singing nonsense lyrics in a terrible monotone. Hey, how about that, nature? We love those plants. Come on down, you dryads, and grow and kill this sorceress and stuff. Hierophile, who had once had such a lovely voice, who had been born singing prophecies, looked at Meg in dismay. With saint-like restraint, she did not punch Meg in the face. Medea sighed. Okay, that's it, Meg. I'm sorry, but I'm sure Nero will forgive me for killing you when I explain how badly you sang. Flutter, Decibel, silence them. Behind the sorceress, Crest gurgled in alarm. He fumbled with his ukulele, despite his bound hands and 2 crushed fingers. Meanwhile, Flutter and Decibel grinned with delight. Now, we shall have revenge. Die! Die! They unfurled their ears, raised their swords, and leapt towards the platform. Could Meg have defeated them with her trusty scimitars? I don't know. Instead, she made a move almost as surprising as her sudden urge to sing. Maybe, looking at poor Crest, she decided that enough Pandos blood had been shed. Maybe she was still thinking about her misdirected anger, and whom she should really spend her energy hating. Whatever the case, her scimitars flicked into ring form. She grabbed a packet from her belt and ripped it open, spraying seeds in the path of the oncoming Pandai. Flutter and Decibel veered and screamed as the plants erupted, covering them in fuzzy green nebulae of ragweed. Flutter smacked into the nearest wall and began sneezing violently, the ragweed rooting him in place like a fly on flypaper. Decibel crash-landed on the platform at Meg's feet, the ragweed growing over him until he looked more like a bush than a pandos, a bush that sneezed a lot. Medea face-palmed. You know, I told Caligula that dragon's teeth warriors make much better guards, but no, he insisted on hiring Pandai. She shook her head in disgust. Sorry, boys, you had your chance. She snapped her fingers again. Aventus swirled to life, pulling a cyclone of cinders from the Ica lake. The spirit shot towards Flutter, ripping the screaming Pandos from the wall and dumping him unceremoniously into the fire. Then it swept across the flat platform, grazing my friend's feet, and pushed Decibel, still sneezing and crying, off the side. Now then, Medea said, if I can encourage the rest of you to be quiet. The Ventus charged, encircling Meg and Grover, lifting them off the platform. I cried out, thrashing in my chains, sure that Medea would hurl my friends into the fire, but they merely hung there suspended. Grover was still playing his pipes, though no sound came through the wind. Meg was scowling and shouting, probably something like, "This again? Are you kidding me?" Hierophile was not caught in the Ventus. I suppose Medea considered her no threat. She stepped to my side, her fists still clenched. I was grateful for that, but I didn't see what one boxing Sibyl could do against the power of Medea. Okay, Medea said, a glint of triumph in her eyes. I'll start again. Doing this chant while controlling a Ventus is not easy work, though, so please behave. Otherwise I might lose my concentration and dump Meg and Grover into the Ica. And really, we have too many impurities in there already. What with the Pandai and the ragweed? Now, where were we? Oh yes, flaying your mortal form. Chapter 42. You want prophecy? I'll drop some nonsense on you. Eat my gibberish. Resist. Hierophile knelt at my side. Apollo, you must resist. I could not speak through the pain. Otherwise I would have told her, resist. Gosh, thanks for that profound wisdom. You must be an oracle or something. At least she did not ask me to spell out the word resist on stone tiles. Sweat poured down my face. My body sizzled, and not in the good way that it used to when I was a god. The sorceress continued her chant. I knew she must be straining her power, but this time I didn't see how I could take advantage of it. I was chained. I couldn't pull the arrow in the chest trick, and even if I did, I suspected Medea was far enough along with her magic that she could just let me die. My essence would trickle into the pool of Ica. I couldn't pipe like Grover. I couldn't rely on ragweed like Meg. I didn't have the sheer power of Jason Grace to break through the Ventus cage and save my friends. Resist. But with what? My consciousness began to waver. I tried to hold on to the day of my birth. Yes, I could remember that far back, when I jumped from my mother's womb and began to sing and dance, filling the world with my glorious voice. I remembered my first trip into the chasm of Delphi, grappling with my enemy Python, filling and feeling his coils around my immortal body. Other memories were more treacherous. I remembered riding the sun chariot through the sky, but I was not myself. I was Helios, titan of the sun, lashing my fiery whip across the backs of my steeds. I saw myself painted golden, with a crown of rays on my brow, moving through a crowd of adoring mortal worshippers. But I was Emperor Caligula, the new sun. Who was I? I tried to picture my mother Leto's face. I could not. My father Zeus, with his terrifying glower, was only a hazy impression. My sister, surely I could never forget my twin. But even her features floated indistinctly in my mind. She had silvery eyes. She smelled of honeysuckle. What else? I panicked. I couldn't remember her name. I couldn't remember my own name. I splayed my fingers on the stone floor. They smoked and crumbled like twigs in a fire. My body seemed to pixelate, the way the panda had when they disintegrated. Heraphile spoke in my ear. Hold on. Help. Will arrive. I didn't see how she could know that, even if she was an oracle. Who would come to my rescue? Who could? You have taken my place, she said. Use that. I moaned in rage and frustration. Why was she talking nonsense? Why couldn't she go back to speaking in riddles? How was I supposed to use being in her place, in her chains? I wasn't an oracle. I wasn't even a god anymore. I was Lester. Oh, perfect. That name I could remember. I gazed across the rows and columns of stone blocks, now all blank, as if waiting for a new challenge. The prophecy wasn't complete. Maybe if I could find a way to finish it, would it make a difference? It had to. Jason had given his life so I could make it to this far. My friends had risked everything. I could not simply give up. To free the oracle, to free Helios from this burning maze, I had to finish what we'd started. Medea's chant droned on, aligning itself to my pulse, taking charge of my mind. I needed to override it, to disrupt it the way Grover had done with his music. You have taken my place, Heraphile had said. I was Apollo, the god of prophecy. It was time for me to be my own oracle. I forced myself to concentrate on the stone blocks. Veins popped along my forehead like firecrackers under my skin. I stammered out, bronze upon gold. The stone tiles shifted, forming a row of 3 tiles in the far upper left corner of the room. 1 word per square. Bronze upon gold. Yes, the Sibyl said. Yes, exactly. Keep going. The effort was horrible. The chains burned, dragging me down. I whimpered in agony. East meets west. A second row of 3 tiles moved into position under the first, blazing with the words I'd just spoken. More lines poured out of me. Legions are redeemed. Light the depths. One against many. Never spirit defeated. Ancient words spoken. Shaking old foundations. What did all that mean? I had no idea. The room rumbled as more blocks shifted into place, new stones rising from the lake to accommodate the sheer number of words. The entire left side of the lake was now roofed by the 8 rows of 3 tile-wide words, like a pool cover, rolled halfway over the Ica. The heat lessened, my shackles cooled, Medea's chant faltered, releasing its hold on my consciousness. What is this? Hissed the sorceress. We're too close to stop now. I will kill your friends if you don't. Behind her, Crest strummed a suspended 4th on the ukulele. Medea, who had apparently forgotten about him, almost leapt into the lava. You too? She shouted at him. Let me work. Heraphile whispered in my ear. Hurry. I understood. Crest was trying to buy me time by distracting Medea. He stubbornly continued playing my ukulele, a series of the most jarring chords I'd taught him, and some he must have been making up on the spot. Meanwhile, Meg and Grover spun in their Ventus cage, trying to break free without any luck. One flick of Medea's fingers, and they would meet the same fate as Flutter and Decibel. Starting my voice again was even more difficult than towing the sun chariot out of the mud. Don't ask about that. Long story involving attractive swamp naiads. Somehow, I croaked out another line. Destroy the tyrant. 3 more tiles lined up, this time in the upper right corner of the room. Aid the winged, I continued. Good gods, I thought, I'm speaking gibberish. But the stones continued to follow the guidance of my voice, much better than Alexia Astrathona had ever done. Under golden hills, great stallions foal. The tiles continued stacking, forming a second column of 3 tile lines that left only a thin strip of the fiery lake visible down the middle of the room. Medea tried to ignore the pandos. She resumed her chanting, but Crest immediately broke her concentration again with an A-flat minor sharp 5. The sorceress shrieked, Enough of that, Pandos! She pulled a dagger from the folds of her dress. Apollo, don't stop, Heraphile warned. You must not. Medea stabbed Crest in the gut, cutting off his dissonant serenade. I sobbed in horror, but somehow forced out more lines. Hearken the trumpets, I croaked, my voice almost gone. Turn red tides. Stop that, Medea shouted at me. Ventus, throw the prisoners. Crest strummed an even uglier chord. Ah! The sorceress turned and stabbed Crest again. Enter strangers home, I sobbed. Another suspended 4th from Crest, another jab from Medea's blade. Regain lost glory, I yelled. The last stone tile shifted into place, completing the second column of lines from the far side of the room to the edge of our platform. I could feel the prophecy's completion, as welcome as a breath of air after a long underwater swim. The flames of Helios, now visible only along the centre of the room, cooled to a red simmer, no worse than your average five-alarm fire. Yes, Heraphile said. Medea turned, snarling. Her hands glistened with the Pandos's blood. Behind her, Crest fell sideways, groaning, pressing the ukulele to his ruined gut. Oh, well done, Apollo, Medea sneered. You made this Pandos die for your sake, for nothing. My magic is far enough along. I'll just flay you the old-fashioned way. She hefted her knife, and as for your friends, she snapped her bloody fingers. Ventus, kill them. Chapter 43. Favourite chapter, because only one bad death. That is just messed up. Then she died. I won't lie, gentle reader, most of this narrative has been painful to write, but that last line was a pure pleasure. Oh, the look on Medea's face. But I should rewind. How did it happen, this most welcome fluke of fate? Medea froze, her eyes widened. She fell to her knees, the knife clattering from her hand. She toppled over face first, revealing a newcomer behind her. Piper McLean, dressed in leather armour over her street clothes, her lip newly stitched, her face still badly bruised, but filled with resolve. Her hair was singed around the edges. A fine layer of ash coated her arms. Her dagger, Catroptris, now protruded from Medea's back. Behind Piper stood a group of warrior maidens, 7 in all. At first I thought the hunters of Artemis had come to save me yet again, but these warriors were armed with shields and spears made of honey gold wood. Behind me the Ventus unspooled, dropping Meg and Grover to the floor. My molten chains crumbled to charcoal dust. Heraphile caught me as I fell over. Medea's hands twitched. She turned her face sideways and opened her mouth, but no words came out. Piper knelt next to her. She placed her hand almost tenderly on the sorceress's shoulder, then, with her other hand, removed Catroptris from between Medea's shoulder blades. One good stab in the back deserves another. Piper kissed Medea on the cheek. I'll tell you to say hello to Jason for me, but he'll be in Elysium. You won't. The sorceress's eyes rolled up in her head. She stopped moving. Piper glanced back at her wood-armoured allies. How about we dump her? Good call. The 7 maidens shouted in unison. They marched forward, lifted the body of Medea and tossed it unceremoniously into the fiery pool of her own grandfather. Piper wiped her bloody dagger on her jeans. With her swollen, stitched-up mouth, her smile was more gruesome than friendly. Hi, guys. I let out a heartbroken sob, which was probably not what Piper expected. Somehow I got to my feet, ignoring the searing pain in my ankles, and ran past her to the place where Crest lay, gurgling weakly. Oh, brave friend! My eyes burned with tears. I cared nothing for my own excruciating pain, the way my skin screamed when I tried to move. Crest's furry face was slack with shock. Blood speckled his snowy white fur. His midsection was a glistening mess. He clutched the ukulele as if it were the only thing anchoring him to the world of the living. You saved us, I said, choking on the words. You bought us just enough time. I will find a way to heal you. He locked eyes with me and managed to croak. Music. God. I laughed nervously. Yes, my young friend, you are a music god. I will teach you every chord. We will have a concert with the 9 muses when I get back to Olympus. My voice faltered. Crest was no longer listening. His eyes had turned glassy. His tortured muscles relaxed. His body crumpled, collapsing inward until the ukulele sat on a pile of dust, a small, sad monument to my many failures. I don't know how long I knelt there, dazed and shaking. It hurt to sob. I sobbed anyway. Finally, Piper crouched next to me. Her face was sympathetic, but I thought somewhere behind her lovely multicoloured eyes she was thinking, another life lost for your sake, Lester, another death you couldn't fix. She did not say that. She sheathed her knife. We grieve later, she said. Right now, our job isn't done. Our job. She had come to our aid, despite everything that had happened, despite Jason. I could not fall apart now, at least no more than I had already. I picked up the ukulele. I was about to mutter some promise to Crest Dust. Then I remembered what came with from my broken promises. I had vowed to teach the young Pandos my instrument, any instrument he wished. Now he was dead. Despite the searing heat of the room, I felt the cold stare of Styx upon me. I leaned on Piper as she helped me across the room, back to the platform where Meg, Grover and Heraphile waited. The 7 women warriors stood nearby as if waiting for orders. Like their shields, their armour was fashioned from cleverly fitted planks of honey gold wood. The women were imposing, each perhaps 7 feet tall, their faces as polished and beautifully turned as their armour. Their hair, in various shades of white, blonde, gold and pale brown, spilled down their backs in waterfall braids. Chlorophyll green tinted their eyes and the veins of their well-muscled limbs. They were dryads, but not like any dryads I'd ever met. "You're the Malay," I said. The women regarded me with disturbingly keen interest, as if they would be equally delighted to fight me, dance with me, or toss me into the fire. The one on the far left spoke. "We are the Malay. Are you the Meg?" I blinked. I got the feeling they were looking for a yes, but as confused as I was pretty sure I was not the Meg. "Hey guys," Piper intervened, pointing to Meg. "This is Meg McCaffrey." The Malay broke into a double-time march, lifting their knees higher than was strictly necessary. They closed ranks, forming a semicircle in front of Meg, like they were doing a marching band manoeuvre. They stopped, banged their spears once against their shields, then lowered their heads in respect. "All hail the Meg," they cried, "daughter of the Creator." Grover and Herophile edged into the corner, as if trying to hide behind the Sibyl's toilet. Meg studied the 7 dryads. My young master's hair was windswept from the Ventus. The electrical tape had come off her glasses, so she looked like she was wearing mismatched rhinestone-encrusted monocles. Her clothes had once again been reduced to a collection of burned, shredded rags, all of which, in my opinion, made her look exactly like the Meg should look. She summoned her usual eloquence. "Hi." Piper's mouth curved in the ghost of a smile. "I met these guys in the entrance to the maze. They were just charging in to find you. Said they heard your song." "My song?" Meg asked. "The music," Grover yelped. "It worked." "We heard the call of nature," cried the lead dryad. That had a different meaning for mortals, but I decided not to mention it. "We heard the pipes of a lord of the wild," said another dryad. "That would be you, I suppose, Satyr. Hail, Satyr." "Hail, Satyr," the others echoed. Yeah, Grover said weakly. "Hail to you too." "But mostly," said a third dryad, "we heard the cry of the Meg, daughter of the Creator. Hail." "Hail," the others echoed. That was quite enough hailing for me. Meg narrowed her eyes. "When you say Creator, do you mean my dad, the botanist, or my mum, Demeter?" The dryads murmured among themselves. Finally, the leader spoke. "This is a most excellent point. We meant the McCaffrey, the great grower of dryads. But now we realize that you are also the daughter of Demeter. You are twice blessed, daughter of 2 creators. We are at your service." Meg picked her nose. "At my service, huh?" She looked at me as if to ask, "Why can't you be a cool servant like this?" "So, how did you guys find us?" "We have many powers," shouted one. "We were born from the Earth Mother's blood. The primordial strength of life flows through us," said another. "We nursed Zeus as a baby," said a third. "We bore an entire race of men, the warlike bronze." "We are the Malay," said a fourth. "We are the mighty ash trees," cried the fifth. This left the last 2 without much to say. They simply muttered, "Ash, yep, we're Ash." Piper chimed in. "So Coach Hedge got Grover's message from the Cloud Nymph. Then I came to find you guys, but I didn't know where this secret entrance was, so I went to downtown LA and again." "By yourself?" Grover asked. Piper's eyes darkened. I realized she had come here first and foremost to get revenge on Medea, secondly to help us, making it out alive. That had been a very distant third on her list of priorities. "Anyway," she continued, "I met these ladies downtown and we sort of made an alliance." Grover gulped. "But Crest said the main entrance would be a death trap. It was heavily guarded." "Yeah, it was." Piper pointed at the dryads. "Not anymore." The dryads looked pleased with themselves. "The ash is mighty," said one. The others murmured in agreement. Herophile stepped out from her hiding place behind the toilet. "But the fires! How did you—" "Ha!" cried a dryad. "It would take more than the fires of a sun titan to destroy us." She held up her shield. One corner was blackened, but the soot was already falling away, revealing new, unblemished wood underneath. Judging from Meg's scowl, I could tell her mind was working overtime. That made me nervous. "So, you guys serve me now?" she asked. The dryads banged their shields again in unison. "We will obey the commands of the Meg," said the leader. "Like if I asked you to go get me some enchiladas." "We would ask how many," shouted another dryad, "and how hot you like your salsa." Meg nodded. "Cool, but first maybe you could escort us safely out of the maze." "It shall be done," said the lead dryad. "Hold on," Piper said. "What about—" She gestured to the floor tiles, where my golden nonsense words still glowed across the stone. While kneeling in chains, I hadn't really been able to appreciate their arrangement. Bronze upon gold, east meets west, legions are redeemed, light the depths. One against many, never spirit defeated, against ancient words spoken, shaking old foundations. Destroy the tyrant, aid the winged, under golden hills. Great stallions foal, hearken the trumpets, turn red tides, enter, strangers home, regain lost glory. What does it mean? Grover asked, looking at me as if I had the faintest idea. My mind ached with exhaustion and sorrow. While Crest had distracted Medea, giving Piper time to arrive and save my friends' lives, I had been spouting nonsense. 2 columns of text with a fiery margin down the middle. They weren't even formatted in an interesting font. It means Apollo succeeded, the Sibyl said proudly. He finished the prophecy. I shook my head, but I didn't. Apollo faces death in Tarquin's tomb unless the doorway to the soundless god is opened by... all of that? Piper scanned the lines. That's a lot of text. Should I write it down? The Sibyl's smile wavered. You mean you don't see it? It's right there. Grover squinted at the golden words. See what? Oh, Meg nodded. Okay, yeah. The 7 dryads all leaned towards her, fascinated. What does it mean, great daughter of the creator? Asked the leader. It's an acrostic, Meg said. Look. She jogged to the upper left corner of the room. She walked along the first letter in each line, then hopped across the margin and walked the first letters of the lines in that column, all while saying the letters out loud. B, E, L, L, O, N, A, S, D, A, U, G, H, T, E, R. Wow! Piper shook her head in amazement. I'm still not sure what the prophecy means about Tarquin and a soundless god and all that, but apparently you need the help of Bellona's daughter. That means the senior praetor at Camp Jupiter, Reina, Avila, Ramirez Arellano. Chapter 44. Ha ha ha, dryads! That's straight from the horse's mouth. Goodbye, Mr. Horse. Hail the Meg, cried the lead dryad. Hail the solver of the puzzle. Hail, the others agreed, followed by much kneeling, banging of spears on shields, and offers to retrieve enchiladas. I might have argued with Meg's hail worthiness if I hadn't just been magically half-flayed to death in burning chains. I could have solved the puzzle. I was also pretty sure Meg hadn't known what an acrostic was until I explained it to her. But we had a bigger problem. The chamber began to shake. Dust trickled from the ceiling. A few stone tiles fell and splashed into the pool of ichor. We must leave, said Hierophile. The prophecy is complete. I am free. This room will not survive. I like leaving, Grover agreed. I like leaving too, but there was one promise I still meant to keep, no matter how much Styx hated me. I knelt at the edge of the platform and stared into the fiery ichor. Apollo? Meg asked. Should we pull him away? Asked a dryad. Should we push him in? Asked another. Meg didn't respond. Maybe she was weighing which offer sounded better. I tried to focus on the fires below. Helios, I murmured. Your imprisonment is over. Medea is dead. The ichor churned and flashed. I felt the Titan's half-conscious anger. Now that he was free, he seemed to be thinking, why shouldn't he vent his power from these tunnels and turn the countryside into a wasteland? He probably also wasn't too happy about getting 2 Pandai, some ragweed, and his evil granddaughter dumped into his nice, fiery essence. You have a right to be angry, I said. But I remember you, your brilliance, your warmth. I remember your friendship with the gods and the mortals of the earth. I can never be as great a sun deity as you were, but every day I try to honour your memory, to remember your best qualities. The ichor bubbled more rapidly. I'm just talking to a friend, I told myself. This is not at all like convincing an intercontinental ballistic missile not to launch itself. I will endure, I told him. I will regain the sun chariot. As long as I drive it, you will be remembered. I will keep your old path across the sky steady and true. But you know, more than anyone, that the fires of the sun don't belong on the earth. They weren't meant to destroy the land, but to warm it. Caligula and Medea have twisted you into a weapon. Don't allow them to win. All you have to do is rest. Return to the ether of chaos, my old friend. Be at peace. The ichor turned white-hot. I was sure my face was about to get an extreme dermal peel. Then the fiery essence fluttered and shimmered like a pool full of moth wings, and the ichor vanished. The heat dissipated. The stone tiles disintegrated into dust and rained into the empty pit. On my arms, the terrible burns faded. The split skin mended itself. The pain ebbed to a tolerable level of, I've just been tortured for 6 hours, agony, and I collapsed, shaking and cold, on the stone floor. You did it, Grover cried. He looked at the dryads, then at Meg, and laughed in amazement. Can you feel it? The heat wave, the drought, the wildfires. They're gone. Indeed, said the lead dryad. The Meg's weakling servant has saved nature. Hail to the Meg! Hail! The other dryads chimed in. I didn't have the energy to protest. The chamber rumbled more violently. A large crack zigzagged down the middle of the ceiling. Let's get out of here. Meg turned to the dryads. Help Apollo. "The Meg has spoken," said the lead dryad. 2 dryads hauled me to my feet and carried me between them. I tried to put my weight on my feet, just for dignity's sake, but it was like roller skating on wheels of wet macaroni. "You know how to get there?" Grover asked the dryads. "We do now," said one. "It is the quickest way back to nature, and that is something we can always find." On a help I'm going to die scale from 1 to 10, exiting the maze was a 10, but since everything else I'd done that week was a 15, it seemed like a piece of balaclava. Tunnel roofs collapsed around us, floors crumbled, monsters attacked, only to be stabbed to death by 7 eager dryads, yelling, "Hail!" Finally, we reached a narrow shaft that slanted upward towards a tiny square of sunlight. "This isn't the way we came in," Grover fretted. "It is close enough," said the lead dryad. "We will go first." No one argued. The 7 dryads raised their shields and marched single file up the shaft. Piper and Heraphile were next, followed by Meg and Grover. I brought up the rear, having recovered enough to crawl on my own with a minimum of weeping and gasping. By the time I emerged into the sunlight and got to my feet, the battle lines had already been drawn. We were back in the old bear pit, though how the shaft led us there I don't know. Then the Malaya had formed a shield wall around the tunnel entrance. Behind them stood the rest of my friends, weapons drawn. Above us, lining the ridge of the cement bowl, a dozen pandai waited with arrows nocked in their bows. In their midst stood the great white stallion Incitatus. When he saw me, he tossed his beautiful mane. "There he is at last. Medea couldn't close the deal, huh?" "Medea is dead," I said. "Unless you run away now, you will be next." Incitatus nickered. "Never liked that sorceress anyway. As for surrendering, Lester, have you looked at yourself lately? You're in no shape to issue threats. We've got the high ground. You've seen how fast Pandai can shoot. I don't know who your pretty allies with the wooden armour are, but it doesn't matter. Come along quietly. Big C is sailing north to deal with your friends in the Bay Area, but we can catch up with the fleet easy enough. My boy has all kinds of special treats planned for you." Piper snarled. I suspected that Heraphile's hand on her shoulder was the only thing keeping the daughter of Aphrodite from charging the enemy all by herself. Meg's scimitars gleamed in the afternoon sun. "Hey, Ash ladies," she said. "How fast can you get up there?" The leader glanced over. "Fast enough, oh Meg." "Cool," Meg said. Then she shouted up at the horse and his troops. "Last chance to surrender." Incitatus sighed. "Fine." "Fine, you surrender?" Meg asked. "No, fine, we'll kill you." "Pandai! Dryads! Attack!" Meg yelled. "Dryads?" Incitatus asked incredulously. It was the last thing he ever said. The Malay leapt out of the pit as if it were no higher than a porch step. The dozen Pandai archers, fastest shots in the west, couldn't fire a single arrow before they were cut to dust by ashen spears. Incitatus whinnied in panic. As the Malay surrounded him, he reared and kicked with his golden shod hooves, for even his great strength was no match for the primordial killer tree spirits. The stallion buckled and fell, skewered from 7 directions at once. The dryads faced Meg. "The deed is done," announced their leader. "Would the Meg like enchiladas now?" Next to me, Piper looked vaguely nauseous, as if vengeance had lost some of its appeal. I thought my voice was powerful. Grover whimpered in agreement. "I've never had nightmares about trees. That might change after today." Even Meg looked uncomfortable, as if just realising what sort of power she'd been given. I was relieved to see that discomfort. It was a sure sign that Meg remained a good person. Power makes good people uneasy rather than joyful or boastful. That's why good people so rarely rise to power. "Let's get out of here," she decided. "To where shall we get out of here, oh Meg?" asked the lead dryad. "Home," said Meg. "Palm Springs." There was no bitterness in her voice as she put those words together. Home, Palm Springs. She needed to return, like the dryads, to her roots. Chapter 45. Desert flowers bloom. Sunset rain sweetens the air. Time for a game show. Piper did not accompany us. She said she had to get back to the Malibu house so as not to worry her father or the Hedge family. They would all be leaving for Oklahoma together tomorrow evening. Also, she had some arrangements to attend to. Her dark tone led me to believe she meant final arrangements, as in for Jason. "Meet me tomorrow afternoon." She handed me a folded sheet of dandelion yellow paper, an NH Financials eviction notice. On the back, she'd scribbled an address in Santa Monica. "We'll get you on your way." I wasn't sure what she meant by that, but without explanation she hiked towards the nearby golf course parking lot, no doubt to borrow a Bedrosian quality vehicle. The rest of us returned to Palm Springs in the red Mercedes. Heraphile drove. We knew ancient oracles could drive. Meg sat next to her. Grover and I took the back. I kept staring forlornly at my seat, where Crest had sat only a few hours before, so anxious to learn his chords and become a god of music. I may have cried. The 7 Malay marched alongside our Mercedes like Secret Service agents, keeping up with us easily, even when we left bumper-to-bumper traffic behind. Despite our victory, we were a sombre crew. No one offered any scintillating conversation. At one point, Hereford tried to break the ice. I spy with my little eye. We responded in unison. No. After that, we rode in silence. The temperature outside cooled at least 15 degrees. A marine layer had rolled in over the Los Angeles basin like a giant wet duster, soaking up all the dry heat and smoke. When we reached San Bernardino, dark clouds swept the hilltops, dropping curtains of rain on the parched, fire-blackened hills. When we came over the pass and saw Palm Springs stretched out below us, Grover cried with happiness. The desert was carpeted in wild flowers, marigolds and poppies, dandelions and primroses, all glistening from the rainfall that had just moved through, leaving the cool air and sweet. Dozens of dryads waited for us on the hilltop outside the cistern. Aloe vera fussed over our wounds. Prickly Pear scowled and asked how we could possibly have ruined our clothes yet again. Reba was so delighted she tried to tango with me, though Caligula's sandals really were not designed for fancy footwork. The rest of the assembled host made a wide circle around the Malay, gawking at them in awe. Joshua hugged Meg so hard she squeaked. "You did it," he said. "The fires are gone." "You don't have to sound so surprised," she grumbled. "And these?" He faced the Malay. I saw them emerge from their saplings earlier today. They said they heard a song they had to follow. That was you?" "Yep." Meg didn't appear to like the way Joshua was staring slack-jawed at the ash dryads. "They are my new minions." "We are the Malay," the leader agreed. She knelt in front of Meg. "We require guidance, O Meg. Where shall we be rooted?" "Rooted?" Meg asked. "But I thought—" "We can remain on the hillside where you planted us, Great Meg," the leader said. "But if you wish us to root elsewhere, you must decide quickly. We will soon be too large and strong to transplant." I had a sudden image of us buying a pickup truck and filling the bed with soil, then driving north to San Francisco with 7 killer ash trees. I liked that idea. Unfortunately, I knew it wouldn't work. Trees were not big on road trips. Meg scratched her ear. "If you guys stay here, you'll be okay? I mean, with the desert and all?" "We will be fine," said the leader. "Though a little more shade and water would be best," said a second ash. Joshua cleared his throat. He brushed his fingers self-consciously through his shaggy hair. We would be most honoured to have you. The force of nature is already strong here, but with the Malay among us—" "Yeah," Prickly Pear agreed. "Nobody would bother us ever again. We could grow in peace." Aloe Vera studied the Malay doubtfully. I imagined she didn't trust life forms that required so little healing. "How far is your range? How much territory can you protect?" A third Malay laughed. We marched today to Los Angeles. That was no hardship. If we are rooted here, we can protect everything within 100 leagues. Reba stroked her dark hair. "Is that far enough to cover Argentina?" "No," Grover said, "but it would cover pretty much all of Southern California." He turned to Meg. "What do you think?" Meg was so tired she was swaying like a sapling. I half expected her to mutter some Meggish answer like "dunno" and pass out. Instead, she gestured to the Malay. "Come over here." We all followed her to the edge of the cistern. Meg pointed down at the shady well with its deep blue pond in the centre. "What about around the pool?" she asked. "Shade, water, I think. I think my dad would have liked that." "The Creator's daughter has spoken," cried a Malay. "Daughter of 2 creators," said another. "Twice blessed. Wise solver of puzzles. The Meg." This left the last 2 with little to add, so they muttered, "Yep, the Meg, yep." The other dryads murmured and nodded. Despite the fact that the ash trees would be taking over their enchilada-eating hangout, no one complained. "A sacred grove of ashes," I said. "I used to have one like that in ancient times. Meg, it's perfect." I faced the Sibyl, who had been standing silently in the back, no doubt stunned to be around so many people after her long captivity. "Herophile," I said, "this grove will be well protected. No one, not even Caligula, could ever threaten you here. I won't tell you what to do. The choice is yours. But would you consider making this your new home?" Herophile wrapped her arms around herself. Her auburn hair was the same colour as the desert hills in the afternoon light. I wondered if she was thinking about how different this hillside was from the one where she was born, where she'd ever had her cave in Eritrea. I could be happy here, she decided. My initial thought, and this was just an idea, is that I heard they produce many game shows in Pasadena. I have several ideas for new ones. Prickly Pear quivered. "How about you put a pin in that, darling? Just join us. Putting a pin in something was a good advice coming from a cactus. Aloe Vera nodded. "We would be honoured to have an oracle. You could warn me whenever anyone was about to get a cold. We would welcome you with open arms, Joshua agreed, except for those of us with prickly arms. They would probably just wave at you. Hereford smiled. Very well, I would be... Her voice seized up as if she were about to start a new prophecy and send us all scrambling. Okay, I said. No need to thank us. It's decided. And so Palm Springs gained an oracle, while the rest of the world was saved from several new daytime TV game shows like Sybil of Fortune or The Oracle is Right. It was a win-win. The rest of the evening was spent making a new camp down the hillside, eating takeaway dinner. I chose the enchilada verdes, thanks for asking, and assuring aloe vera that our layers of medicinal goop were thick enough. The Malay dug up their own saplings and replanted them in the cistern, which I guessed was the dryad version of pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. At sunset, their leader came to Meg and bowed low. We will slumber now, but whenever you call, if we are within range, we shall answer. We shall protect this land in the name of the Meg. Thanks, said the Meg, poetic as always. The Malay faded into their 7 ash trees, which now made a beautiful ring around the pond. Their branches glowed with a soft, buttery light. The other dryads moved across the hillside, enjoying the cool air and the stars in the smoke-free night sky, as they gave the Sybil a tour of her new home. And here are some rocks, they told her, and over here there are more rocks. Grover sat down next to Meg and me with a contented sigh. The satyr had changed his clothes, a green cap, a fresh tie-dyed shirt, clean jeans and a new pair of hoof-appropriate New Balance shoes. A backpack was slung on his shoulder. My heart sank to see him dressed for travel, though I was not surprised. Going somewhere? I asked. He grinned. Back to Camp Half-Blood. Now? Meg demanded. He spread his hands. I've been here for years. Thanks to you guys, my work is finally actually done. I mean, I know you still have a long way to go, freeing the oracles and all, but... He was too polite to finish the thought. But please do not ask me to go any further with you. You deserve to go home, I said wistfully, wishing I could do the same. But you won't even rest the night? Grover got a faraway look in his eyes. I need to get back. Satyrs aren't dryads, but we have roots too. Camp Half-Blood is mine. I've been gone too long. I hope Juniper hasn't got herself a new goat. I recalled the way the dryad Juniper had fretted and worried about her absent boyfriend when I was at camp. I doubt she could ever replace such an excellent satyr, I said. Thank you, Grover Underwood. We couldn't have succeeded without you and Walt Whitman. He laughed, but his expression immediately darkened. I'm just sorry about Jason, and... His gaze fell on the ukulele in my lap. I hadn't let it out of my sight since we returned, though I hadn't had the heart to tune the strings, much less play it. Yes, I agreed. And Moneymaker, and all the others who perished trying to find the burning maze, or in the fires, the drought. Wow, for a second there I'd been feeling okay. Grover really knew how to kill a vibe. His goatee quivered. I'm sure you guys will make it to Camp Jupiter, he said. I've never been there, or met Raina, but I hear she's good. She's good people. My buddy Tyson the Cyclops is there too. Tell him I said hi. I thought about what awaited us in the north. Aside from what we gleaned about Caligula's yacht, that his attack during the new moon had not gone well. We didn't know what was going on at Camp Jupiter, or whether Leo Valdez was still there or flying back to Indianapolis. All we knew was that Caligula, now without his stallion and his sorceress, was sailing to the Bay Area to deal with Camp Jupiter personally. We had to get there first. We will be fine, I said, trying to convince myself. We've wrested 3 oracles from the Triumvirate. Now, aside from Delphi itself, only one source of prophecy remains, the Sibylline books, or rather, what Ella the Harpy is trying to reconstruct of them from memory. Grover frowned. Yeah, Ella, Tyson's girlfriend. He sounded confused, as if it made no sense that a Cyclops would have a Harpy girlfriend, much less one with a photographic memory who had somehow become our only link to books of prophecy that had burned up centuries before. Very little of our situation made sense, but I was a former Olympian. I was used to incoherence. Thanks, Grover. Meg gave the satyr a hug and kissed him on the cheek, which was certainly more gratitude than she'd ever shown me. You bet, Grover said. Thank you, Meg. He gulped. You've been a great friend. I like talking plants with you. I was also there, I said. Grover smiled sheepishly. He got to his feet and clicked together the chest straps of his backpack. Sleep well, you guys, and good luck. I have a feeling I'll see you again before I ascend into the heavens and regain my immortal throne? Before we all die in some miserable fashion at the hands of the Triumvirate? I wasn't sure, but after Grover left I felt an empty place in my chest, as if the hole I'd poked with the arrow of Dodona were growing deeper and wider. I unlaced the sandals of Caligula and tossed them away. I slept miserably and had a miserable dream. I lay at the bottom of a cold, dark river. Above me floated a woman in black silky robes, the goddess Styx, the living incarnation of the infernal waters. More broken promises, she hissed. A sob built in my throat. I did not need the reminder. Jason Grace is dead, she continued, and the young Pandos. Crest, I wanted to scream. He had a name. Do you begin to feel the folly of your rash vow upon my waters? Asked Styx. There will be more deaths. My wrath will spare no one close to you until amends are made. Enjoy your time as a mortal, Apollo. Water began filling my lungs, as if my body had just now remembered it needed oxygen. I woke up gasping. Dawn was breaking over the desert. I was hugging my ukulele so tightly it had left gouge marks on my forearms and bruised my chest. Meg's sleeping bag was empty, but before I could look for her, she scrambled down the hill towards me, a strange, excited light in her eyes. Apollo, get up, she said. You need to see this. Chapter 46. Second prize, Road Trip, with Bon Jovi on cassette. First prize, please don't ask. The McCaffrey mansion had been reborn, or rather regrown. Overnight, desert hardwoods had sprouted and grown at incredible speed, forming the beams and floors of multi-level stilt house, much like the old one. Heavy vines had emerged from the stone ruins, weaving together the walls and ceilings, leaving room for windows and skylights shaded by awnings made of wisteria. The biggest difference in the new house, the great room had been built in a horseshoe shape around the cistern, leaving the ash grove open to the sky. We hope you like it, said Aloe Vera, taking us on a tour. We all got together and decided it was the least we could do. The interior was cool and comfortable, with fountains and running water in every room provided by living root pipes from subterranean springs. Blooming cacti and Joshua trees decorated the spaces. Massive branches had shaped themselves into furniture. Even Dr. McCaffrey's old work desk had been lovingly recreated. Meg sniffed, blinking furiously. Oh dear, said Aloe Vera. I hope you're not allergic to the house. No, this place is amazing. Meg threw herself into Aloe's arms, ignoring the dryad's many pointy bits. Wow, I said. Meg's poetry must have been rubbing off on me. How many nature spirits did it take to accomplish this? Aloe shrugged modestly. Every dryad in the Mojave Desert wanted to help. You saved us all, and you restored the Malay. She gave Meg a gooey kiss on the cheek. Your father would be so proud. You have completed his work. Meg blinked back tears. I just wish... She didn't need to finish. We all knew how many lives had not been saved. Will you stay? Aloe asked. Atalis is your home. Meg gazed across the desert vista. I was terrified she would say yes. Her final command to me would be to continue my quests by myself, and this time she would mean it. Why shouldn't she? She had found her home. She had friends here, including 7 very powerful dryads who would hail her and bring her enchiladas every morning. She could become the protector of Southern California, far from Nero's grasp. She might find peace. The idea of being free from Meg would have delighted me just a few weeks ago, but now I found the idea insupportable. Yes, I wanted her to be happy, but I knew she had many things yet to do. First among them was facing Nero once again, closing that horrible chapter of her life by confronting and conquering the beast. Oh, and also, I needed Meg's help. Call me selfish, but I couldn't imagine going on without her. Meg squeezed Aloe's hand. Maybe someday. I hope so. But right now, we got places to be. Grover had generously left us the Mercedes he'd borrowed from, wherever. After saying our goodbyes to Herophile and the Dryads, who were discussing plans to create a giant Scrabbleboard floor in one of the back bedrooms at Aphalis, we drove to Santa Monica to find the address Piper had given me. I kept looking in the rearview mirror, wondering if the highway patrol would pull us over for car theft. That would have been the perfect end to my week. It took us a while to find the right address. A small private airfield near the Santa Monica waterfront. A security guard let us through the gates with no questions, as if he'd been expecting 2 teenagers in a possibly stolen red Mercedes. We drove straight into the tarmac. A gleaming white Cessna was parked near the terminal, right next to Coach Hedges' yellow Pinto. I shuddered, wondering if we were trapped in an episode of The Oracle is Right. First prize, the Cessna. Second prize, no, I couldn't face the idea. Coach Hedge was changing baby Chuck's diaper on the hood of the Pinto, keeping Chuck distracted by letting him gnaw on a grenade, which was probably just an empty casing. Probably. Melly stood next to him, supervising. When she saw us, she waved and gave us a sad smile, but she pointed towards the plane, where Piper stood at the base of the steps, talking to the pilot. In her hands, Piper held something large and flat, a display board. She had a couple of books under her arm, too. To her right, near the tail of the aircraft, the luggage compartment stood open. Ground crew members were carefully strapping down a large wooden box with brass fixtures. A coffin. As Meg and I walked up, the captain shook Piper's hand. His face was tight with sympathy. Everything is in order, Miss McLean. I'll be on board doing pre-flight checks until our passengers are ready." He gave us a quick nod, then climbed into the Cessna. Piper was dressed in faded denim jeans and a green camo tank top. She'd cut her hair in a shorter, choppier style, probably because so much had been singed off anyway, which gave her an eerie resemblance to Thalia Grace. Her multicoloured eyes picked up the grey of the tarmac, so she might have been mistaken for a child of Athena. The display board she held was, of course, Jason's diorama of Temple Hill at Camp Jupiter. Tucked under her arm were Jason's 2 sketchbooks. A ball bearing lodged itself in my throat. "Ah, yeah," she said. "The school let me clear out his stuff." I took the map one might take the folded flag of a fallen soldier. Meg slid the sketchbooks into her knapsack. "You're off to Oklahoma?" I asked, pointing my chin towards the plane. Piper laughed. "Well, yes, but we're driving. My dad rented an SUV. He's waiting for the Hedges and me at DK's Donuts." She smiled sadly. "First place he ever took me to breakfast when we moved out here." "Driving?" Meg asked. "But the plane is for you two," Piper said. "And Jason. Like I said, my dad had enough flight time and fuel credit for one last trip. I talked to him about sending Jason home. I mean, the home he had the longest, in the Bay Area, and how you guys could escort him up there. Dad agreed this was a much better use of the plane. We're happy to drive." I looked at the diorama of Temple Hill, all the little Monopoly tokens carefully labelled in Jason's hand. I read the label, Apollo. I could hear Jason's voice in my mind saying my name, asking me for one favour. "Whatever happens, when you get back to Olympus, when you're a god again, remember what it's like to be human." This, I thought, was being human, standing on the tarmac, watching mortals load the body of a friend and hero into the cargo hold, knowing that he would never be coming back, saying goodbye to a grieving young woman who had done everything to help us, and knowing you could never repay her, never compensate her for all that she'd lost. "Piper, My voice seized up like the Sibyl's. "It's fine," she said. "Just get to Camp Jupiter safely. Let them give Jason the Roman burial he deserves. Stop Caligula." Her words weren't bitter, as I might have expected. They were simply arid, like Palm Springs air. No judgment, just natural heat. Meg glanced at the coffin in the cargo hold. She looked uneasy about flying with a dead companion. I couldn't blame her. I'd never invited Hades to go sun cruising with me for a good reason. Mixing the underworld and the overworld was bad luck. Regardless, Meg muttered, "Thank you." Piper pulled the younger girl into a hug and kissed her forehead. "Don't mention it, and if you're ever in Tahlequah, come and visit me, okay?" I thought about the millions of young people who prayed to me every year, hoping to leave their small hometowns across the world and come here to Los Angeles, to make their huge dreams come true. Now Piper McLean was going the other way, leaving the glamour and the movie glitz of her father's former life, going back to small-town Tahlequah, Oklahoma, and she sounded at peace with it, as if she knew her own Athalas would be waiting there. Nellie and Coach Head strolled over, baby Chuck still happily chewing his grenade in the coach's arms. "Hey," Coach said, "you about ready, Piper? Long road ahead." The starter's expression was grim and determined. He looked at the coffin in the cargo bay, then quickly fixed his eyes on the tarmac. "Just about," Piper agreed. "You sure the Pinto is up for such a long trip?" "Of course," Hedge said. "Just, keep in sight in case the SUV breaks down and you need my help." Melly rolled her eyes. "Chuck and I are riding in the SUV." The coach harumphed. "That's fine. It'll give me time to play my tunes. I've got Bon Jovi's entire collection on cassette." I tried to smile encouragingly, though I decided to give Hades a new suggestion for the Fields of Punishment if I ever saw him again. Pinto, road trip, Bon Jovi on cassette. Meg bopped baby Chuck on the nose, which made him giggle and spit grenade shavings. "What are you guys going to do in Oklahoma?" she asked. "Coach, of course," said the coach. "They've got some great varsity sports teams in Oklahoma. Plus, I hear nature is pretty strong there. Nice place to raise a kid." "And there's always work for cloud nymphs," Melly said. "Everybody needs clouds." Meg stared into the sky, maybe wondering how many of those clouds were nymphs making minimum wage. Then suddenly her mouth fell open. Guys?" She pointed north. A gleaming shape resolved against a line of white clouds. For a moment I thought a small plane was making its final approach. Then its wings flapped. The ground crew scrambled into action as Festus, the bronze dragon, came in for a landing. Leo Valdez riding on his back. The crew waved their orange flashlight cones, guiding Festus to a spot next to the Cessna. None of the mortals seemed to find this at all unusual. One of the crew shouted up at Leo, asking if he needed any fuel. Leo grinned. "Nah, but if you could give my boy a wash and wax and maybe find him some Tabasco sauce, that would be great." Festus roared in approval. Leo Valdez climbed down and jogged towards us. Whatever adventures he may have had, he seemed to have come through with his curly black hair, his impish smile, and his small elfish frame intact. He wore a purple t-shirt with gold words in Latin. My cohort went to New Rome, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. "The party can start now," he announced. "There's my peeps." I didn't know what to say. We all just stood there stunned as Leo gave us hugs. "Man, what's up with you guys?" he asked. "Somebody hit you with a flash grenade? So, I got good news and bad news from New Rome, but first..." He scanned our faces. His expression began to crumble. "Where's Jason?" Chapter 47. In-flight beverages. Include the tears of a god. Please have exact change. Piper broke down. She fell against Leo and sobbed out the story until he, thunderstruck, red-eyed, hugged her back and buried his face in her neck. The ground crew gave us space. The Hedges retreated to the Pinto, where the coach clasped Melly and their baby tight, the way one should always do with family, knowing that tragedy could strike anyone, any time. Meg and I stood by, Jason's diorama still fluttering in my arms. Next to the Chesna, Festus raised his head, made a low, keening sound, then blasted fire into the sky. The ground crew looked a little nervous about that as they hosed down his wings. I suppose private jets didn't often keen or spew fire from their nostrils, or have nostrils. The air around us seemed to crystallize, forming brittle shards of emotion that would cut us no matter which way we turned. Leo looked like he'd been struck repeatedly, and I knew I had seen him struck repeatedly. He brushed the tears from his face. He stared at the cargo hold, then at the diorama in my hands. I couldn't even say goodbye," he murmured. Piper shook her head. "Me neither. It happened so fast. He did what Jason always did," Leo said. "He saved the day." Piper took a shaky breath. "What about you? Your news?" "My news?" Leo choked back a sob. "After that, who cares about my news?" "Hey!" Piper punched his arm. "Apollo told me what you were up to. What happened to Camp Jupiter?" Leo tapped his fingers at his thighs, as if carrying on two simultaneous conversations in Morse code. We stopped this attack, sort of. There was a lot of damage. That's the bad news. A lot of good people." He glanced again at the cargo hold. "Well, Frank is okay. Raina, Hazel. That's the good news." He shivered. "Gods, I can't even think right now. Is that normal? Like, just forgetting how to think?" I could assure him that it was, at least in my experience. The captain came down the steps of the plane. "Sorry, Miss McLean, but we are queued for departure, if we don't want to lose our window." "Yeah," Piper said. "Of course. Apollo and Meg, you guys go. I'll be fine with the coach and Melly." "Leo." "Oh, you're not getting rid of me," said Leo. "You just earned a Bronze Dragon escort to Oklahoma." "Leo, we're not arguing about this," he insisted. "Besides, it's more or less on the way back to Indianapolis." Piper's smile was as faint as fog. "You're settling in Indianapolis? Me and Tahlequah? We're really going places, huh?" Leo turned to us. "Go on, you guys. Take Jason home. Do right by him. You'll find Camp Jupiter still there." From the window of the plane, the last I saw of Piper and Leo, Coach and Melly, they were huddled on the tarmac, plotting their journey east with their Bronze Dragon and their yellow Pinto. Meanwhile, we taxied down the runway in our private jet. We rumbled into the sky, heading for Camp Jupiter and a rendezvous with Raina, the daughter of Bellona. I didn't know how I would find Tarquin's tomb or who the soundless god was supposed to be. I didn't know how we would stop Caligula from attacking the damaged Roman camp, but none of that bothered me as much as what had happened to us already. So many lives destroyed, a hero's coffin rattling in the cargo hold, 3 emperors who were all still alive, ready to wreak more havoc on everyone and everything I cared about. I found myself crying. It was ridiculous. Gods don't cry. But as I looked at Jason's diorama in the seat next to me, all I could think about was that he would never get to see his carefully labelled plans finished. As I held my ukulele, I could only picture Crest playing his last chord with broken fingers. "Hey!" Meg turned in the seat in front of me. Despite her usual cat-eye glasses and preschool-coloured outfit, somehow mended, yet again, by the magic of the ever-patient dryads, Meg sounded more grown-up today, surer of herself. "We're going to make everything right." I shook my head miserably. What does that even mean? Caligula is heading north, Nero is still out there, we've faced 3 emperors and defeated none of them, and Python. She bopped me on the nose, much harder than she had baby Chuck. "Ow! Got your attention?" Yes." "Then listen. You will get to the Tiber alive. You will start to jive. That's what the prophecy said back in Indiana, right? It will make sense once we get there. You're going to beat the triumvirate." I blinked. "Is that an order?" "It's a promise." I wish she hadn't put it that way. I could almost hear the goddess Styx laughing, her voice echoing from the cold cargo hold where the son of Jupiter now rested in his coffin. The thought made me angry. Meg was right. I would defeat the emperors. I would free Delphi from Python's grasp. I would not allow those who had sacrificed themselves to do so for nothing. Perhaps this quest had ended on a suspended fourth cord. We still had much to do. But from now on, I would be more than Leicester. I would be more than an observer. I would be Apollo. I would remember. And that is the end of The Trials of Apollo, the Burning Maze by Rick Riordan.